I've landed $1 billion company with literally nothing. It's not that complicated. We made the list of top 250 fastest growing companies on the Inc. 5,000 list. I was born overseas. I'm an immigrant. I've built a couple of other startups. I failed at many of them in the process.
I think every entrepreneur ever, like if you're honest with yourself, you are probably making mistakes all the time.
Entrepreneurship is all about taking a risk, right? I think that's a big problem in entrepreneurship, right? People overthink. If you do things right, like an MVP shouldn't take more than 30 to 90 days to build. Like at the time, like I had nothing. I was a one person, more or less like a one person company. We sent out a few emails, or maybe a few hundred emails. And one of the emails ended up landing at Rover. At the time, I think they just raised their Series B, and it was like the hottest unicorn in Seattle. And at the time, I literally had the landing page, and I had a good landing page. And when I went to see Rover, they're like, "Cool. Oh my God, man, I love the text on your landing page." We had no team. Like literally, like I was the only person working at Thirsty Sprout. Here's $1 billion company looking for outsourced engineers. And I'm like, yeah, I can make this happen. Like, like it's not a problem. I feel like if I had to do it all over again, I would.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the ABCs for Building the Future podcast. My name is Robert. We bring on entrepreneurs, researchers, people building the future, people doing big things with big stories to tell. Today, we have on my friend, David Stepania, CEO, founder of Thirsty Sprout. David, do you want to give a quick intro of yourself?
Sounds good. Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is David. I'm the founder of Thirsty Sprout. We are a technical recruiting and staffing company that is building some technology behind our name that will automate sourcing, recruiting, and vetting of candidates and take the load off of all the recruiters out there. We made the list of top 250 fastest growing companies on the Inc. 5,000 list. I was born overseas. I'm an immigrant. I've built a couple of other startups. I failed at many of them in the process. Actually, still I experiment probably a couple times a year to try something else on, either on the side or with someone else. But all these lessons have taught me what matters in building a venture, and I'm happy to share that with you today.
Super cool. Yeah, and you said it's number 247 on the Inc. 5,000. Is that what you said?
Yes, that was 2024.
Sweet. So hopefully this year it's like inching up even more, right?
Hopefully, yeah, we're landing some big
That's awesome.
clients. So we'll see. We'll see. Last year was a little bit tough, but yeah, this year hopefully things are going to pick back up.
Yeah, and I'm sure we were just talking right before we started the pod, but like I'm sure some of that velocity is from your very prolific content strategy on LinkedIn, which we'll get into in a sec. I'd love to talk about that a bit more. But digging into your journey, you mentioned you've been like a serial entrepreneur, and also you're an immigrant. Well, where are you from for the viewers? And then how did you even get into entrepreneurship next?
So I was born in a country called Georgia, which is in between Russia and Turkey. After that, I moved to Slovenia. After Slovenia, I moved to the US, and I've lived in a couple different places since then, like, Hawaii, Florida, Seattle. Right now, I'm in Mexico. Actually, I've been here for past 3 years on and off. I met my wife here, and we're expecting our second kid here. So the way I got into entrepreneurship, I think my life was always had so much ups and downs. I think the only way for me to feel excited is trying to solve a problem and trying to always get from point A to point B. I don't like status quo. I like to grow, learn, figure new things out, and be an artist of my own life, basically. Waking up every day and picking on what you want to work on that day, wherever you are, doesn't matter. It's like you dictate your schedule. Like in a nutshell, that's it. You're not limited by geography. You're not limited by resources.
Autonomy. Yeah. Cool. So freedom and to be the artist of your own life. I really like that phrase, be the artist of your own life. That might be like the YouTube title or something like that, or on the thumbnail. That's really good.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about your ventures like before and some of the you mentioned, you went through a lot of failures and mistakes. Me too. I think every entrepreneur ever, like if you're honest with yourself, you are probably making mistakes all the time, right? So, can you highlight some of the defining moments slash mistakes and learnings that you've had in your career, and how you got to this point in time where you decided I'm going to go after this space around recruiting automation with Thirsty Sprout? I'm kind of curious about that.
Okay. Yeah. The first mistake I feel like I made was I listened to my parents and I got a job. No, just kidding. So no, I
That's a
did
good one, man.
that.
That's a good one.
I did that, and I think
That's a good one.
yeah, I think that set me back a few years. But it was also something that allowed me to realize where I'm really unhappy, right? Like, which is like working in a job, very restricted, doing one thing. But again, like I'm not discouraging anyone from a job. Obviously, there's a lot of great entrepreneurs who have hailed from Stripe,
Yeah.
Facebook, Google. I would say it's actually a great way to go. Just for me, like I mentioned, like earlier in the call, I think my life was kind of like always like up and down, always moving around. Escaped one war, this, that. In high school and college, I supported myself doing, actually kind of like
From high school.
uh,
High school.
high school, yeah. If we go into details, actually, even in high school, we used to have parties, and at those parties, we needed to sell alcohol, or people needed alcohol, so we
Yeah.
sold alcohol. So I mean, you can keep that on the record. It's not too bad. I feel like who hasn't done that? So yeah, technically,
I
like,
love that.
I mean, if you think about it, right, like everyone kind of gets their start either they had a paper route back in the day, and then later down the road, I don't know, like everyone entrepreneur has hustled to some levels, and so did I. So in college, same thing. I mean, we used to promote nightclubs before we were 21, and so we're always,
Oh,
just like I said, striving for like for I don't know, for something that maybe was not the traditional way of going about things. Another thing was, like I said, I wasn't legally able to work till I was like 20. So like we did whatever
okay.
we could to earn an extra dollar, right? So
Yeah.
the journey actually started way back in the day, before like, yeah, before college. After college, I did get a job. I was fired from a couple of jobs, actually. One of it was like maybe for performance reasons. I mean, performance in the sense of like I was really not with the idea of like staying with the company. It was not something I was enjoying doing at the time. Other was like some other reasons, like I got injured, and like I same thing, like I was like, I can't do this job anymore. And
Yeah.
things fell apart. And at some point, like I said, I decided to, like I actually like I did have one job that I really enjoyed. It was working for a company
Oh,
called
yeah.
Centurion. We were selling wireless modules. I was learning a lot there. The company was growing really fast at the time. At least for those times, we were the market leader in wireless module manufacturing. I learned a lot from our vice president of sales. It was a great team. I really, like that's where I think I learned that you don't need like a big team to have like a really great business. And so we had a small team that sold these components all over U.S. And North and South America, and we were crushing it, right? And so that's why I kind of learned my lessons of how to run a strong sales team. And at some point, that parlayed into a company called Data Micro that me and my friend kind of partnered up on, along with a partner we had in China at the time that provided us with networking and routers that we sold all over in the US and Europe. And I took the lessons from Centurion. Mostly at the time, it was like outbound email, outbound setting up outbound SDR teams. That's kind of like the move that has worked really well, and it was just kind of starting up at that time. I think Salesforce was the first to adopt it, and slowly everyone started copying it. At the time when
Yeah.
outbound still worked, I think our open rates were 50, 60, 80% sometimes. And yeah, we built
Yeah.
like a solid business at the time, doing, I don't know, $20 million in revenue. And yeah, for about 3 or 4 years, the business was doing quite well. At some point, our main partner, which was Cisco, had changed up how the business is done in the space. They wanted to have Chinese serial numbers to stay in Asia, and the serial numbers that are the product that they manufacture in Mexico, they wanted to go to US. And so long story short, they switched up the supply chain lines and things of that sort, and had an effect on us. We didn't have as much inventory, and the business started going down the hill. And that's when I started to figure out, like, well, what is next? Like, I want to work remote. At the time I was in Hawaii, and I needed to figure something else to do. And so me and my buddy, we invested in a startup idea. I mean, together. Mostly I invested. He was doing the work, and we outsourced the product to a dev shop in India. And long story short, I lost about $100,000 in the process. And at the end, yeah, we didn't really have a product that really worked. Partially, it was my buddy's. You could say it was partially my buddy's fault, because he was also new at this. Like, he wasn't, like someone who had experience in building software products. Like, he was fresh out of college, more or less, or maybe he had a couple of years of experience, and I had no experience building software products also. And so, long story short, that is what got me to want to start Thirsty Sprout. At some point, I realized, like, hey, you know what? Like, I think software is the future. But I don't really have a team I can trust. And if I don't have a team I can trust, the cost of, wasting your money, outsourcing projects to some sketchy dev shops is quite high. And I won't be able to keep up with all the experiments I need to do. So that's when I, decided, hey, you know what? Like, I want to build my own team, or I want to have a company that, has top tier talent and can build cool products. And that's how Thirsty Sprout got started. And I mean, again, I do want to say at the idea, or the initial idea, was that we build a product studio. That's not exactly what we're doing now, but we made a few pivots along the way. I'm happy to share, like, why and how, dive a little more into that if you'd like.
There's so many things like to dive into there. But thanks for sharing some of the ups and downs. It sounds like you've really been through it, especially with starting your career, trying to figure out probably like where can I get freedom, and then that fell into entrepreneurship. And it also is cool that you like really hustled during high school days and stuff like that. Mark Cuban has a similar story, right? About like selling nightclubs, ticketing things. I think, yeah, you should look that up if you haven't already. So that's a common thread. So maybe your future is in the bees, right?
You have to.
But that's super cool. That's super cool. So you mentioned building up SDR teams, and then that really gave you a lot of skills. And then you went into business with your friend, and that didn't go well. And a big thing that I heard was you just both didn't have domain expertise. And then that led to, we should be trying to find really capable, high trust people, like build our own team. And then I'm guessing that led you to figure out other people had the same problem. And I'm guessing somewhere along the way, you made pivots to solve that for other people. So tell me about those pivots, every single one, in as much detail as you would like.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I mentioned, like, initially, I mean, we were trying to build a Groupon, not a clone, but like something similar to Groupon at the time when Groupon was the only player in town. Long story short, as you know, like, if you do things right, like, an MVP shouldn't take more than 30 to 90 days to build. It took us like a year, and it was still not really working. So, that's when we, like, by that time, like, I think Living Social, or I don't know what company popped up, and so many other clones popped up. The business idea just kind of died off. And like I said, I was, like, I just wasted, like $100,000 and some of my own time. And long story short, that at some point, that's when I decided to start Thirsty Sprout. Initially, like, I wanted it to be a product studio, but again, evaluating what I know, which is, I wasn't a product person at the time. I was the business development person. That still stands true today. Long story short, at some point, one of my best friends right now, like at the time, he wasn't my best friend. He was just like a really smart engineer and a tech leader who founded a couple of successful startups, told me to focus on recruiting and staffing. It's much more scalable. Companies really need good engineers, and there's plenty of them in Eastern Europe, and there's not enough of them in the US. And so, long story short, I took his advice. We sent out a few emails, or maybe a few hundred emails. And, one of the emails ended up landing at Rover. At the time, I think they just raised their Series B, and it was like the hottest unicorn in Seattle. And the email really resonated with the founder. He called me up, or wrote, responded to my email. He said like, "Hey, come into the office, like let's talk." I went in, we got our first big client, and I realized that, like this is it. Like this makes a lot more sense. Like, the biggest eye opener at the time was the fact that like we've got this, we've built a team for Rover in Eastern Europe. Believe it or not, at the time, like we had no team. Like literally, like I was the only person working at Thirsty Sprout. Here's $1 billion company looking for outsourced engineers, and I'm like, yeah, I can make this happen. Like, like it's not a problem. I got people in Eastern Europe. Technically, like I found a couple of guys through a partner and others, directly. And one of those engineers that we found for Rover has worked with us up until like a few months ago, like so 7 years, right? Like, and he was great. Like any company that he's ever worked with, everyone loved. We've scaled teams underneath him, and but yeah, I mean that was it. Like I think entrepreneurship is all about taking a risk, right? Like at the time, like I had nothing. I was a one person, more or less like a one person company. I had a couple of small engagements with like one other engineer who was a friend of mine, but he was junior, who thought he could do senior stuff. So all our projects were like, I basically paid for some of our clients' projects because they were so underestimated by my buddy.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's like
yeah.
we would quote out, or me and him would quote out something, say for $20,000, and it ended up costing us, I don't know, like 6 months or 8 months of our time. And when we did the math, like maybe we made like $2 an hour. And so that's when I was like, you know what? Like, I think the recruiting and staffing, it makes a lot more sense. Like, the Rover team was extremely happy with the work that these guys were doing. And I mean, these are, like we're making a good margin, on these developers. Rover team was like extremely excited, as I mentioned. Like they were like, dude, your guys are outworking our internal team by like 30%, like, which is, and I mean,
Wow.
yeah, you talk about eye opener. I was like, well, how is this $1 billion company like, doing what they're doing when we have like outsourced engineers? And so that's when I was like, okay, like there's something here. But at the time, like I said, like I was still learning, like recruiting, staffing, all of this is new to me. Like I guess like I'm a very, you could say, stubborn, but also focused, driven person. And I thought, like this could work. This could give me the independence, the freedom that I want. And I just created like a long-term vision. Like I looked at, Thirsty Sprout as like, hey, this is what I'm not starting this company as like something I want to sell. Like I want this to be something that lasts me a lifetime. And then I'll take, depending on how big it grows, like whatever, percentage of the revenue, I'll take it and I'll invest it into other companies. And that's kind of what I do today. Most of the investments that we have made, like they're mostly like internal investments into building our own now software product, or two, or maybe actually three. We're like experimenting with a couple of different things, but I've also invested in some of my friends' startups, and yeah, that's about it.
That's super cool. Wait, the Rover story is crazy. You got to tell me more about that. So you basically just got advice from your friend who had some success finding product market fit for a couple startups. Smart guy. And he was like, looking at recruiting. So you looked into it and then you just cold emailed tons of big companies and then Rover got back. And then you had no product, but then you had demand. And then so you went and fulfilled. What was that like? What was that fulfillment process like? Because you're like, early and this is like you're just starting Thirsty Sprout. You hadn't done recruiting. How did you go find that Eastern Europe team? Like, how did you do that? What? Like, what was in between that?
I went back to the same buddy that told me to do recruiting. I'm like, where do I find these developers? and and so he's from Eastern Europe. I mean, like he's Russian. I'm Eastern European. Like we're like I said, like
Okay.
we're friends. And he's like, okay, you know what? Like I know a couple people, and we just made it happen. And I think like like that's a big problem in entrepreneurship, right? Like people overthink things. And so at the time, I literally had the landing page, and I had a good landing page. I created my own landing page, and when I went to see Rover, they're like, oh my god, man, I love the text on your landing page. So the text and the images. And so
Oh,
I developed my own landing page. I used WordPress, but I wrote a nice copy.
yeah.
Like at the time I was studying, like I was studying a little bit about how to write a decent copy. And when you talk about LinkedIn marketing, right? Or like, writing content on LinkedIn,
Yes.
English is not my first language. I'm horrible at it. It takes me a long time to write something, but now it's a lot easier with like AI. Like I can put my thoughts down. It helps me auto complete it and stuff like that. So I have like
Yeah.
pretty good vision of how things should work. And I just, like I said, like I figure how, like all my life I had to figure how to make things work going from one school to another. Like at one point, like
Yeah.
I think from the third grade till about seventh grade, I didn't really have like a stable year in high school. I didn't have a textbook because like when I moved countries, I didn't speak the language of that country. So I would have to fly back to Georgia
Oh,
to finish my exams there. But I would go to class in Slovenia and sit there kind of like a dummy. But but at the same, like it's the same thing. Like I always, in my mind, it was always like kind of like a survival mode, in the sense of like, well, how do I just complete this? Like how do I go from point A to point B? And so that's what like allows me, like, to me it's just exciting to do startups. Like when startup is trying to figure something out, like, okay, like tell me, like maybe I can
yeah.
help you. It's not that complicated. Like I've landed a $1 billion company with literally nothing. Like I had like
Nothing.
a
Landing
landing
page
page,
and
a landing
copy,
page.
right. Landing page and the email copy must have been amazing as well, right? Because I mean, I've read a lot about copywriting, and I'm curious, like, how did you think about writing that original copy and the landing page? What did you think about to put yourself in the shoes of the target ICP? Like, what was the thought process back then? I'm curious, and how has that evolved? Because obviously, like, so for the podcast viewers, David is pretty prolific on LinkedIn and he's had a few really viral posts that get like million plus impressions. I'm really impressed with that. And then hearing that, it's not even his first language is just, that's mind blowing to me. So take us through how you even thought about that original landing page design and copywriting. It was a little while ago, but I'm curious about that. And then how have your skills evolved since then?
So I appreciate good design. That we mentioned, like I want to be an artist of my life. I think I have an artistic side
Yeah.
to what I do. Like my father was an architect. I like good art. I mean, I have some stuff here in the back, nothing too crazy.
Yeah, I saw it. Actually. That's cool.
But yeah, I kind of whipped up the landing page from like a theme, and I mean, obviously it was like a modified. I was trying to learn it myself, how to do a little bit of development. I have taken classes on development. I graduated from like a coding school. It's not on my LinkedIn or anything like that, but
Mm,
I'm not like a coder. Like I don't do much coding, but I have, again, same thing, like passed a couple of like classes, as well as like got a degree in it, or like postgraduate stuff. But without going too much into detail, to answer your question about the copy, it's the same principle. It's like I looked at
yeah.
what are others doing and what are they doing, like successfully, and then also try to see, like, where is there a gap where Thirsty Sprout could come in, and focus on more on authenticity, focus more on trying to be a little bit different from all the other ones. I don't know if that has worked really well or not. Like a lot of people still think Thirsty Sprout is a restaurant. It's not like a place for software developers. Just the name itself is just it sounds a little bit off. But there's some symbolism
Yeah.
there. Like we thought of Thirsty Sprout as like as a place where people are hungry for growth, and they like to see startups grow. And so there's some symbolism there in the sense of like, we're thirsty for growth, and Sprout is like a startup that needs to grow, right? And so that was kind of like the idea behind the name, and it still stands true today. I mean, that's like we created our backstory, and we wrote truly how we feel about what we want to do, what we want to achieve. And it seemed to have resonated with Rover at the time, and as well as many other startups.
Like literally went from your friend suggested go into recruiting, you just made a WordPress landing page, learned dev a little bit to do that, learned copywriting, not it like you didn't English is not your native language, and then you landed Rover. Like that's a pretty incredible story, David. That I think that really speaks to the tenacity and the determination that I hear from your journey.
Yeah.
And so I saw, you also work on other things. Like you mentioned, like you invest internally on projects, and you also invest into other startups. And so, you have this thing, Home Base, which is bringing AI founders together. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that? Like what started Home Base and your interest there?
So again, yeah, let me tell you first, I guess, about Homebase. It's just simply for now, it's a newsletter and a community where we share stories of other founders building cool products in the AI space, as well as leaders of enterprise companies and what enterprises are doing with AI. I've built a couple of communities in the past. We had, I think, about 6,000 people in our Facebook community for early stage startups. That we started back during the pandemic. The community solved a very specific problem, but it grew really fast, and so it's an interesting lesson there. Before every every time YC is looking to accept new startups, they put out a message that says like, dude, like some of you people sound like you have like a good business, but you can't pitch it. So if you can't pitch it in like a couple of sentences, like we're not going to read the whole thing, right? And so I created a community where people come in, they would post their pitch, and if it doesn't make sense, they would get feedback from other founders. And then in return, they would also need to provide feedback to other founders in the community so that they could get answers to their pitch, right? And dude, it blew up. Like within 3 months, it had 6,000 members, and they're super engaged. But the challenge there was that, as soon as they would, pitch and get their, startup story or whatever out there, they would kind of disappear. It's like, like they need to figure like to do all the other things.
They got to go actually execute.
But it's like it was very hard to sustain it because it was just like give, but like people would just there was a leaky bucket problem. I mean, and that bucket was super leaky, right? Because like beyond the pitch, like there's not much that they can get from the group. So long story short, like I knew how to build community, or like I know how to build communities a little bit, and so I'm trying to do something similar here. Although I would say building a community a few years ago was much easier than now. So that's why we're kind of taking the extra step and working on a few different things at Homebase. So Homebase is going to have a newsletter with interviews with other founders, sharing insights as well as techniques and strategies for how to build or implement AI products into your companies. Given the fact that I've been doing Thirsty Sprout for a long while, we're also adding other resources into the mix. Like we're going to give members access to a free investor database. We have over 40,000, so we're building a product out of that, as well as like discounts for other startups products. And so building a little Y Combinator startup school without like the Y Combinator funding, so to say. So we'll see. It's taken, obviously it's going to take a little bit longer, but like I said, it's my way of giving back to startups, and then also kind of staying in the loop with those startups and enterprises.
That's really cool. I gotta join this. I think that's what I just learned here.
Yeah.
That's cool. So everybody, if you Google home base, we'll drop into the show notes too. Like sign up for home base. Lots of good resources, as David's saying. One thing I wanted to double click on. You mentioned building community before was easier. Now it's harder.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
I think as the world gets more digital, the competition for your attention is just getting a little bit out of control, right? So like your ads
Yeah.
cost more. Your even think about like the media, right? Like people used to love long form stuff. Now it's like TikTok, short form,
Yeah.
obviously people still appreciate long form stuff, but I think the people's attention is kind of like slowly becoming kind of like a goldfish.
Totally.
uh
Yeah.
and-
That's commoditized now, right?
yeah, yeah.
Attention's commoditized now.
Yeah, so it's like super hard, I think, to do communities because there's so many of them. And it's not just
Mm.
that there's so many of them, it's hard to do something that's innovative with communities, right? So I think
Yeah.
COVID was kind of like the final nail in the coffin where people were so there's so many communities that they joined and so many Zoom meetings and stuff like that. Now they want to go back to in-person stuff. So if you're going to do a community, it has to have like an in-person aspect to it. I feel like otherwise it's going to be very hard. Like something needs to bring them together, and then that's going to carry
Yeah.
over maybe for next few months and keep the engagement going, right? Like at least that's what I've heard works. I do have something planned there. I live in Mexico here on a beautiful beach in Riviera Maya. So hopefully I'll be putting in an event here for founders someday. I don't know how soon it's
Oh,
going
dude,
to but
hit me up.
yeah.
That sounds fun.
But yeah, we'll see.
That's cool.
Yeah, during the pandemic, it was awesome here. There were so many founders, so many really smart people. But like now, there's everyone's being called back to the office and stuff like that. So
Uh,
it got a little bit more quiet. Again, like that's also the reason why I'm doing the home base is because I want to be able to stay connected with the founders while not being like in New York or San Francisco or Seattle. So
yeah.
uh,
That's very cool. Yeah, and one of the things that I've come to realize in entrepreneurship as well is community building just generates a lot of serendipitous value for the community and for whoever's facilitating it. So yeah, that's interesting. I've learned that like we're both in Sidebar together, right? That's how we met.
Mhm.
And Sidebar also, I'm thinking about what you said. Like it's the in-person stuff that builds the connections, that authenticity, the genuine depth of connection that's really hard to replace online.
Mhm.
And so they're doing events and stuff. They're trying to drive more of that. And funny enough, like we met through Sidebar, and we're like, oh yeah, you're a founder. We should talk. And we got together. But I think what I also want to say is you're right about the whole attention spans are lower. So this is a good segue to talking about LinkedIn. So you're pretty prolific on LinkedIn. What's your strategy there? And it's interesting because you're not a native English speaker, but you also mentioned you have this artistic side to you. And then I could see that definitely expressed through LinkedIn. And before we even recorded, you mentioned things around like going against the grain or being authentic. So talk to us a little bit about your because I guess I'll preface and say what I've learned in entrepreneurship is I think in today's world, community building and content strategy, like you just have to do that.
Mhm.
Like cost of acquiring customers is so high when you just go for the paid ads route, right?
Mhm.
Or like even guerrilla marketing. I've tried those. And so what I've come to realize is if you have a strong personal brand as a founder, your CAC could go to zero or negative, right? Like you see this with like Mr. Beast.
Mhm.
Like think about him, right? Like he ships a video,
Mhm.
it's evergreen. He's collecting ad money forever.
Mhm.
And they click a video, they watch it, and they go to the grocery store, they see his chocolate bar, they buy it, right? So it just serves as like he's getting paid to make an ad. Like that's a negative CAC, right? And so every founder, I've realized like that's a cheat code. And so in the past year, I've started working on my own personal brand. So a few things there. Do you kind of agree with that thesis of, hey, personal brand is important. It can get to negative CAC, and community building content strategy is important too in entrepreneurship in this age. That's my thinking. I'm curious about yours, and then how you inform your content strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, personal brand, I think works. The thing is, like, like right now it's a hot topic, but honestly, like, there's been LinkedIn influencers like since 2010. Like there was like, even when I started my first, or like when I was doing my last company, like there was guys with like 100,000 followers. Like they would just post like random pictures of like Mercedes Benz and like not even their Mercedes Benz, right? And so it's still like that stuff has worked for forever, but now it's like one of the last things that's working. And I would say like you should hurry up and do it, because even that's going to get saturated, and then even that's going to become super hard. And LinkedIn is one of the only places that allows you to kind of like go viral with like pretty easily. I mean, like you just need to speak your mind. Like I think a lot of people, like I see them posting very like generic content, and it's like, okay, if you have 1 million followers and you post that content, I mean, it's not good, but some people will see it. But if you post it and you have no followers, then that's too generic for you to get any traction. So my advice there is like, like try, like you have to like, you have to be a little bit edgy to kind of like get the attention this
Like
way.
stand out.
Yeah. So
yeah, what's some of your advice on standing out or being edgy?
So I think you need to decide on a couple of things there. You can go wide, and if you go wide, you have to be even more edgy. Like think about, we talk about like Mr. Beast, right? Like how does he do it? Like he figures out like what are some crazy commercials out there, and how do you make them crazier, right? Like, and so it's the same thing, like it's the same thing here. It's like, okay, like is someone giving AI advice? And so like, okay, like, you look at them and you're like, this guy's pretty smart. He went to a great university. Well, how do you compete with him? Like, like he has like so the way you compete with him is like you help open people's mind up a little bit and thinking in a different direction, right? What you don't want is like, just agreeing with something that someone already owns. Like, like he's an AI influencer, and so like he already has that audience, so everyone agrees with him, everyone likes his statuses. But okay, think completely the other way. And so that's where the opportunity is, right? Like if you want to go wide, right? Now, my suggestion is there's two things. Like I have my own team, and so they help me with things. And so my thinking is that because I have my own team and they help me with a few different things, I can afford to go wider and try to capture the attention using a couple other different techniques that I'm gonna like implement in my development of the personal brand, right? Like we're gonna build an email newsletter. We have a community. I'm gonna, I'm gonna probably help them, spread my message in different communities. It's very hard to do that by yourself. So I have
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I have like, I mean, when I say this, like I do all this stuff myself, and then when I see something working, then I tell my team members like, hey, like this is working. Can you go and do this, right?
Scale it up.
Yeah. And so, so that's how I operate there. But if I didn't have a team, then what I would do is go pretty narrow, like pick a very specific problem. So for AI, I would pick AI and health, or AI and fintech. Probably AI and fintech is already busy, right? But like, you would just try to go as narrow as possible and try to expand from there, right? For me, I decided to, like I said, and I could be wrong here, like I decided to go wide. Like for example, there's sometimes I do like for a community I went wide, and we're struggling a little bit, like what keeps me like what keeps me going is that most other communities are also struggling. So I'm like, like like I'm, it's like it's hard. Like I'm just gonna go for the numbers, and then hopefully, like in the process, I make a few champions. Like what's interesting about my community is that a lot of people message me directly, but none of them freaking post in the damn general chat. Like, come on, man! Like this is the question you can ask. So it's like I open up, and there's like every day I have like a dozen of messages. I'm like, you could have posted this in the general chat.
Please just post it to all chat.
Come on, man.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So learn some good things from that. Is take a definitive stance, especially if you're smaller. If you're bigger, you can kind of post whatever and you'll get network effects because you've simply just gotten to that point. But if you're smaller, what other people do, try to compete with them a different way. It's kind of like startup mode, right? Like it's the same sort of principles that apply. Find some niche, start small, expand from there. That's also interesting. I'll add in another note. So I've been posting on LinkedIn for a while and trying to discover like my voice and stuff like that in writing. And when I started, it was more about like, okay, let me just write things I'm interested in and see what people like, and then just write newsletters and take the long form and then create short form from that. And then when I started this latest venture, Epistemic Me, it's very different than what I originally talked about. So I have kind of had to change my strategy. And then I started thinking about, where does my ideal customer profile live?
Mhm.
So actually for me, it's like AI and longevity right now. So I've had to, I don't know actually if AI and longevity people are LinkedIn, but I think there's another community that I'm part of, Don't Die by Brian Johnson, which is nascent.
Mhm.
And one of the things I've learned just by some of the pros at this, like Gary V, Alex Hormozy and stuff, whenever there's a nascent community, that's where you should go really hard at that nascent community, especially if you think you have a strong hypothesis that your ICP is there.
Mhm.
Because it's simply a numbers game. If it's a community that you think is going to grow, if there's only 1,000 people there right now and you become prominent,
Mhm.
then as it grows, you scale with it. LinkedIn, like TikTok, Twitter is a good example. It's really hard to grow on Twitter right
Mhm.
now. It's so saturated.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess the question for you is, LinkedIn where your ICP is, and is that why you're like really gas pedaling there, or are there other platforms you're focusing on too?
I would say LinkedIn is pretty much where my ICP is. I think the only challenge with my ICP, for a lot of them, they check LinkedIn only when they need to switch their jobs, right? So that, but I mean, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, because like a lot of people are also
yeah,
annoyed by by LinkedIn, clickbait stuff, blah blah blah. But
yeah,
like I can see like because I talk to some of these guys sometimes, and like they've seen my posts, and they've even commented on them. They're like, man, like every time I log in, there's something that's gonna grab your attention and suck you in, and then you have to respond to that comment and add your thoughts, right? So it's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
every time they log in, the key is to get their attention. Like, you got to be
Okay,
there.
I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
That's where the competition is get the attention, then get the interest,
Because
get the
they don't log in
consideration.
that often. Like some of them, like once they find a job, like last thing they want to be on LinkedIn is like, like they have to do their job. Like
Yeah,
they don't want. But when they do log in,
get
like
it.
you better, like that's. I think that's when, like, yeah, when
Yeah,
does stuff go viral? It's not because all these engineer managers and engineers are just doing nothing. It's like it goes viral when like stars align, and like one day they all log in, and
mm,
like some of them add a comment, another day
yeah,
another logs in. So there's a lot of stuff in the mix, but that's why you got to post consistently every day. And it's like
yeah,
I realized like it's really tricky. The best thing to do is post consistently, and I'll tell you why. I've taken the same
yeah,
post, and when I post it and I'm like, a minute or two goes by and there's no action, sometimes I'll delete it. And some people say do not do that, but I'm like, dude, like this is a good post, like how is this getting zero action? And I'll post the
yeah.
same post an hour later, and it has gone completely bonkers. Like it went super viral, right? And so,
Wow,
like,
yeah,
yeah, it's. I think it's just about like I don't know. I mean, I didn't design LinkedIn's algorithm, but if it lands at the right
yeah,
time, at the right place, boom, it's going viral. And like you kind of have a feeling for what's
yeah.
gonna go viral and what's not. I mean, occasionally there
Mm,
has been posts where I was like, "Oh, why is this not getting as much action as I'd like? This is just as good of a post as the other one." But it is what it
yeah,
is. Like I think because like if you just sit there and you're like, "Oh, like will this go viral? Will this go viral?" Like you're gonna waste, like big chunk of your day, right? But on the
yeah,
flip
yeah,
side, if you just kind of like make it, like post it, okay, no one saw it, that's fine. I'll post pretty much the same thing a week later since no one saw it. Like who cares?
yeah. So just to get the reps in
Yeah.
is
So
really what it sounds like.
yeah,
Just keep getting the reps in, show up.
exactly.
Yeah. And this also speaks to like the importance of owning your own audience, right? Because in LinkedIn, you don't really own your own audience. Like
Mhm.
it's just whenever they try to log in and see it. And this is also what I realized. So I'm like, oh, newsletter game, podcast game is the way. So then you start owning your own audience,
Yeah.
and then you build that trust and credibility over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's super cool. Like around LinkedIn content strategy and how that seems to generate you leads, and that's part of your overall engine.
Mhm.
You mentioned one thing, and then I want to move into a different topic. But just to close that out, how do you know what's the feeling of, hey, I think this can go viral, or hey, I think this has strong potential? Like, what is that if you broke it down?
That's tricky. I I think, I mean, like,
Is that the artistic side of you that's like there's a gut feeling or something? Or
nah, I mean, like, so, well, there's a couple different ways, like, to figure that out. Like,
yeah.
first of all, like, it is true. Like, you can look at other people's posts and see what went viral, but there's just as much truth in seeing some posts that didn't go viral, and you're like, how did this not go viral? Let me add my thoughts to this,
Hmm.
and then it goes viral, right? But this
Oh,
part of
okay.
adding your thoughts can be quite tricky because you have to be like, you have to have enough experience where you say something that's worth listening to, right? And so that's why,
Yeah.
like, I don't think, like, depending who you're targeting, like, there needs to be enough substance there where you're like, okay, like, this wasn't covered by the news, like, this has like
Oh,
good
okay.
hook, these are some things that other people spoke about that, like, seem valid, and so we need to include this into the argument. And so you just like combine a lot of good stuff together. But again, like, you need to know what you're doing to do this, right? And so then you just hit ship and see where it lands. The only challenge is, like I said, like, some of the posts that have gotten viral that I have done, like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it has taken me like 2 hours to write up the post, including assistance from AI,
Okay.
cloud, ChatGPT,
Yeah.
like, every, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's still like, I'm faster at it now, but, like, I'll be honest, like, the
It's
post,
still putting in the work.
yeah, the posts that have gone viral, I put in a lot of effort into them. most
Yeah, I
most
mean,
of the time.
that's what I've learned is actually, like, it just follows power laws, actually. Like, I remember I had posted, I think, a couple hundred, maybe like 150 posts, and then, like, one of them got more impressions than all of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, definitely follows power laws." And I like what you said, which is, like, if you're adding to something, a perspective, then your perspective must have substance, which means you must be some sort of thought leader. You must know your shit a
Mhm.
bit, right? That's really important too, because I think people could sniff that out pretty easily, especially if they're in the domain of expertise. Thanks for sharing about, your content strategy, how you think about virality. Moving a little bit away from that, back to some other entrepreneurial lessons. So you've spent years helping other companies like Rover, Mailchimp build world class engineering teams. That's super cool. And so just tying that together with like another entrepreneurial lesson learned, like what are the most unconventional hiring insights you've learned? Like something that, maybe goes against what most people assume about building high performing technology teams.
Uh, that's a tricky one because it's, there's so much knowledge that's like unconventional, but it's kind of conventional. Like, for example, like, not like, you don't need
Yeah.
FANG engineers to build your product, right? Like, that's like, I think, like, most startups will, like, yeah, like, I think like, that information is now going around. Like, you don't need to spend six figures, or, like, like, pay someone a few $100,000 to build your MVP. It's like, it's like, one thing is, like, you need to figure out how to get from point A to point B. So, in simple terms, doesn't matter who builds your MVP. You need to make sure it just functions, and you ideally probably, like, spend as little money as possible, right? um
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so that's like, that's talking about MVP. Another thing, I think, like, I keep getting these startups that ping me, and they're all about trying to build an internal team, like, they want to own the employees. But when you're an early stage, company, I mean, again, like, same thing as like an MVP, it doesn't matter if you're working with a partner who has access, who knows how to hire, which is super hard to do. Like, it was super hard to grow Thirsty Sprout, and you need to move
Yeah.
fast. Just use the freaking contractors, man. Like, and then figure out how to buy out those contractors. Like, don't like we there's been
Yeah.
so many startups where, that we worked with, where, like, they hyper focus on building their own internal team. Guess what? Like, none of them are around. Like, they had their FANG engineers. Like,
Yeah.
none of them are around until you're Series A. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, just try to figure out, like, how to find the product market fit. Like, you should, like, and something that fits your budget, and someone that passes your test. Like, like, you don't
Yeah.
need to build like this amazing culture, and, like, buy a ping pong table in your office. Like, like, it's like, I, I
Pool tables, ping pong tables, foosball tables.
yeah, like this stuff doesn't matter too much. Like you're almost like guaranteed that like people who start with you aren't gonna end up with you. So it's gonna actually cost you more to hire an
Yeah,
employee than to work with like contractors. So that's like a one, that is out there. Like, or another one, like I said, like trying to hire FANG engineers for your start. Like who cares? Like you need to find like, like you're looking for product market fit. Most likely you're going to be rebuilding a
yeah,
lot of shit. And so like, yes, you do
yeah,
need good engineers, like ideally, right? In most cases, like especially like
yeah.
if you're, if you're kind of like a seed stage company, doesn't matter where they are. I
Mhm.
mean, it does matter. Like it helps if they're in the same room, but if not, like, like you need to figure out how to build a startup that can work well in a remote setting.
Yeah.
And my other advice is actually like oftentimes do not listen to VCs. We've been
Tell me more. Tell me more. I need to hear this.
yeah, this like so I think VCs have figured out a way or like figured out the fact that like, hey, we're funding this startup. So we're giving them money. And then if they hire an outsourcing company that is outside of our network, that money is just like leaving for good. So why don't we fund another venture backed tech marketplace and tell these startups to hire from there, even if it's a shit, engineer or like
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
least the money stays circulating in our buckets, and then this marketplace will grow. And so there's been so many cases where the startups will work, like I won't name the specific marketplaces, but
Yeah.
they'll work with someone in their network because that marketplace was funded by the same investor, but they're going to have someone that costs sometimes like double the money and is half as good as what you can get from like a good dev shop. There's, by the way, there's a lot of shitty dev shops, but there's also a lot of
Yeah.
good dev shops or marketplaces that do good work and they're not money hungry. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like to an extent, right? And so
Totally.
but like we've had clients where they're like, dude, like your guy's good, like we're overpaying for the other guy, but these guys are funding us, so like our hands are kind of tied, like we can't tell them no.
Oh.
So I
Oh,
think,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, as a startup, like you have to just like go with the idea of like, hey, you know what, like we're gonna do it our way. Like that's why I started the company. I didn't start it here so that I can do shit your way. So if you can figure out a relationship where you can put yourself in a position like that, I think you'll be good.
Yeah.
But there's so many people who are like, oh, we raised VC money and it's all about raising money and not about
Yeah.
building a startup. Like you're losing more and more control so that you can put like, hey, I got funded by AZ16 or like, Kozla or whatever. And those are the same investors that went back and screw them like the moment they could, right? Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Very interesting.
a couple of
So,
different ideas.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Just to summarize, it sounds like early stage startups trying to find product market fit. Your advice is go fucking find product market fit. That's it. Like that's doesn't matter how. That's what you need to do. And actually, when you were saying like you don't need the best FANG engineer or whatever to find that, I started thinking about your story of like you literally had no code written and you sold the Rover, and then you figured, and that's how that was your experiment, right? And you didn't need dev hours to experiment on whether or not that was an underserved need in the market. You just went out, wrote copy, and cold outbound emailed that copy, and then that was an experiment. That was a very cheap experiment, and then you were able to validate the concept. That's actually something that I have also found, and I have been also guilty of this, which is like maybe spending too much time polishing. There was a great quote. I won't do it justice. It's by Reid Hoffman. Something like, "If you're not embarrassed by the product you put out, then you've shipped too late," or something like that. Where the whole goal isn't getting the perfect thing out there. The whole goal is learning from the experiment as cheaply as possible to get the insights on what are the underserved needs and would people pay for a solution that I have for them. So I really like that lesson around it's really just experimentation, and especially in the early stage, pre-seed or before Series A, it's really just like, is this even going to work? Like that's what you're trying to figure out. So
Exactly.
I like that. I like that.
Be pretty simple about it. It's like, hey, you know what? Like, this is what my hypothesis is. This is what my budget is. I need good developers. Doesn't matter if they're in-house, out-house. Like, if I can get them in-house, that's great. If not, I paid them well enough where they're gonna respect this job. That's it. Like, and
Yeah, yeah.
and so that's it. Like, you don't need to worry about the ping pong tables. Like, so many people start building a startup and doing everything but building a startup. Like they're doing all the advice
Okay.
they see on like,
Yeah.
what VCs tell them they should be doing, like how they need to focus on the culture. It's like, no, get people that can get shit done. Like get other
Yeah.
engineers who have that mindset. Like, you need people who can get shit done, who deliver on the promises they make.
So that's actually an interesting one to hone in on more. In the hiring process of like vetting great engineers, what are things to look out for? Like how do you assess this is a get shit done person, right? Like has a bias towards action. Hey, if I put my dollars here, they're gonna get results. They're gonna be hungry. Like how do you assess that? That I think you'd be a good person to ask because I'm sure you've been through a lot of thinking here.
I think the best way is to, my personal advice is like the best way is work on some kind of trial period. Like that could be 2 weeks,
Okay.
4 weeks, and figure out like how they work, how they problem solve, and if they give you excuses. If not, because like we've been burned ourselves. Like we talked to some engineers, well
Yeah.
spoken, like technically super capable,
Yeah.
but when it comes to doing work, all of a sudden like an excuse pops up, like, oh, I need to do this, or I need to do
Okay.
that. Oh, I'll finish this tomorrow. Like, and sometimes that's visible
Okay.
right from the get-go. Like you don't need to spend a lot of time.
I see.
So you don't want, like, that's why you don't
I
want to
see.
like overcommit and say like, like, oh, I'll do, like we'll hire this guy, just give him an offer. Again, like this is why I encourage startup founders, like find good engineers, work with them for a year, see how they do, and then have some kind of agreement with like a contracting
Yeah.
company to buy them out. Like if it works, it works, because a lot can
Yeah.
be like a lot will change over that year that you're building a startup. Like some will kind of drop off, maybe some will get a second job.
Yeah.
Like, all kinds of dirty stuff happens out there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I like that advice for early stage founders, which is trial run it because yeah, it's more flexible working for an early stage startup than is like let's go work at Google. I don't think Google or Facebook are going to give you like, hey, work for 2 weeks and then we'll convert you if you meet all this criteria. But I like that advice, and I've implemented some of that in the past, and that's worked well. When I've deviated from that plan, it didn't work well actually. When I was like, oh yeah, this person's so great, and then it's like, let's do it, and then it didn't work well, and now we're kind of handcuffed together, and
Mhm.
then it almost dilutes team culture and stuff too. So I think that's really good advice for early stage
I would
founders.
say that's the best. I mean, there's obviously like the vetting and all the stuff that you can do, but that's kind of like almost table stakes. It's like at the end, like if you want to safeguard
Yeah,
yourself, work with the person part time for a month, for 2 months, like however long it takes for you to build that
yeah,
trust. And
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so that's some good advice around, hey, VCs might give you bad advice. Really check on that, see where their incentives lie. I like that. Like as a founder, if your VC is telling you hire from their other VC backed thing, I didn't quite think about it that way, but yeah, you're right. Like that money stays with them, so it's lower risk to them. It serves them. It doesn't quite serve the founder, especially early stage where it's like you're trying to cheaply experiment to get to PMF. So
yeah.
that's really good advice. Do you have any other advice for early stage founders now that we're just on the topic?
I don't know. There's so much. I usually, like I said, I think there's more specific advice to everyone and each, startup that kind of goes out there. So I don't like to throw a blanket. Start
What
with,
about what about what about like finding a co-founder? That's something that a lot of people ask me about, and I'm curious, like thoughts on finding co-founders.
I would use the same thing as what like try to work on something
Trial
that
running.
doesn't lock you into contracts and see how it goes.
Yeah,
Like something that where, like ideally like some money exchanges. And so if you don't end up suing each other or fighting or like spending more time on arguing than building, then it's probably a good match.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I actually was just thinking about this a week ago or so, and I was like, founder is kind of like dating, right? Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
you're going to be talking to the person all the time. You want to make sure you're on the same page about things like finances or values. And so I like that litmus test. It's like, are you arguing most of the time or are you building most of the time? That's probably a good one. And then also the trial running. That's actually how I found my co-founder for Epistemic Me was we just kind of like worked together for 2 months, and then we committed like, okay, let's make this real. This works out, and we have a great complementary skill set. So
Yeah, yeah, and how,
cool.
how
Okay,
you
cool.
resolve arguments is so important too, right? Because you don't want to kill each other over like a small little thing. So
Oh my gosh. So yeah, no, that's so true. And in the process of trial running it, hopefully you get to a point where there's tension, and then you get to see how do you resolve that tension together? Like, is it, does it go to shit, or are you adults about it and can work through that tension? I think that's a really good point too. Like, those are some of the more soft skill things that I think are really important that people don't think enough about. I'm non-technical, I got to find technical co-founder, or I'm technical, I got to find a business co-founder, but they don't quite think about it like from the, hey, are we building more than we're arguing? Is it effective? I think that's really, like, cuts through the truth of it. All right, David, we have learned so much from your journey, from hustling in high school, selling nightclubs, to being an immigrant, not being able to work, not knowing English, and now you have a business that is working. And in the middle of that was selling to Rover, a really big unicorn at the time, just off of copy. That's really impressive. I'd love to see that email at some point on the side. But to round out the podcast, I always try to ask this just to help the audience understand your journey. If you had 1 hour with your younger self that was just starting, what are the top 3 things you would discuss?
1 hour with myself, younger self. It's a tricky one because like I had so little guidance at the time. I was kind of like figuring things on my own. I came to US by myself when I was like, or not by myself. My brother came here and I followed him here, but I had to figure things out on my own since I was like 13 years old here in the US. So a couple of things that I would definitely tell is like find people you can mirror and mentors, like surround yourself with mentors, but before we even go there, like figure out like what your end goal is. I kind of did that with myself. Like I remember, like I think you mentioned like if there's like something that like stood out. Like I remember I had a fight with my brother and I told him like, you know what, I'll be an entrepreneur, I don't know why I'm going to school, blah blah blah. So I think you definitely want to start with a goal in mind, although I would put different kind of goals. So it's like, whether it's monetary. So I would write those down. Writing those goals down is always important. I would journal and I would measure everything every day. I still do that. I mean, I try to stay as consistent as possible. I would throw down some, a plan of how I would achieve some things I would achieve. And I would say, even more importantly, I would figure out like what is the mechanism to adjust my plan when things are not going the right way, right? And so those are the few things I would do so that I could grow either in my career or startup or dating. I think I spend
dating.
I mean, everything, like, because like I spend a lot of time just kind of like, oh, like this will figure itself out. Like I feel like if I had to do it all over again, I would do it 10 times faster, right? Like the achievements that I had, instead of just kind of cruising by, I would just be very kind of like, detailed about
more tactical, more
tactical. So.
Got it. Okay. So start with the end in mind, be flexible and adjust the plan, but have a plan. Write down your goals and be consistent. I think those are really great pieces of advice for younger you, but then also for me and everybody listening to this too. So David, thanks so much for hopping on the pod. I'll hit you up about home base. I'm kind of curious about that. And if you do throw some sort of founders thing in Mexico, definitely let me know. And thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. How can people find you, folks listening to this?
LinkedIn is probably the best, but I also have Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best option. And I'll get you my links and then you can add them up. Yeah. If whoever wants to connect,
we'll throw them in the
exchange ideas. I'm always here.
Absolutely. And if you're an early stage founder or you're running a tech company and you need awesome engineering talent, David is your guy, and we'll throw a link to Thirsty Sprout there if you're interested. David, thank you so much for hopping on the pod. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you have a great time with your partner, and congrats on the second one on the way, man.
Thank you.
That's really awesome.
Thanks, Robert. It was good talking to you.
Thanks.
We'll talk later.